You're listening to Maneuvering Mondays, a podcast about transforming work culture. In this first part of the episode, we follow the fictional story of Marie, who's an HR manager in the edtech company Zebra Apps, as she maneuvers the challenges of transforming their work culture.
Todd couldn't fit in a coffee appointment until the following Thursday. Marie was waiting for him in the coffee shop, her order of a cappuccino and cinnamon bun in front of her. She sat in the same chair at the same table as when she met with Anne. It was early in the afternoon, and the traffic still easily flowed through the intersection that she could see from the window. She took a sip of her cappuccino. Frankly, she wasn't sure she needed this coffee meeting at all anymore. Last night, she presented the culture program to the entire leadership team. There had only been one question from the VP of Development, Jenny, on whether this initiative would take her developers away from their day jobs. Neither Jaque nor Frank had any questions or comments and raised their hands in approval when Natalie put the program to a vote. When Natalie left the meeting room, she felt like this was a major win for her in development HR. Smooth as a kitten. The only concern she had left with was the look on Mark's face after the unanimous approval. He looked like he was suffering. Was he envious that she had pulled it off? Or was there something going on that she wasn't seeing? Marie thought back to the heated discussion she had witnessed between Mark and Natalie. "Hey, Marie," Todd said from behind her. She turned around and stood up from the chair. "Hey, Todd," she said as she hugged him. "I'll just order a cup," he said, pointing to the counter. Marie sat down in her chair. He came back with a chocolate scone and a cup of tea. Marie must have stared at his tea because he said, "I'm trying to cut down on coffee." "Huh," Marie said. "I'm trying to lean into my natural body clock," he continued, "and my body wants to go to bed at 8 p.m. "I'm barely out of the office by 8, Marie said. Todd smiled knowingly. Marie felt uneasy. "We have been in the same spot," he said. "So you are not the only one watching your body clock at ConvoSystems?" Marie asked, making air quotes with her fingers. "No, I am not," Todd said, retracting his chin closer to his neck. Marie realized that she may have come off aggressive, but there was nothing she could do about that now. "Well, that is kind of what I want to talk to you about," she said. "You've been working on your company culture for the past 2 years now." Todd nodded. "Yes, and we are continuing that journey still," he said. "We just contracted with Anne to take us to the next level." Marie felt as if the air was knocked out of her. "Anne? Our Anne?" she said. "She hasn't been your Anne for almost a year now," Todd said. "But yes, Anne. "What does the next level even mean?" Marie asked, without necessarily asking Todd specifically. The past 2 years, we have come to a company-wide clarity on what it means to be in ConvoSystems, of how we want it to feel to work with us, of what requires us to do, and how we deal with disagreements or behavior that challenges how we aspire to be, Todd said. Now we are ready to start reorganizing our organizational structure to fit with our values. Marie let it sink in. 2 years to achieve clarity on values. An exercise she was planning would take 2 hours at a town hall. "Systems," she said. "What's that?" Todd asked. "Anne is all about designing systems, so it makes sense you would bring her in at this stage," Marie said. "Exactly," Todd said, smiling. "We were very pleased that she agreed to join us on this journey." Marie felt like rolling her eyes. Journey was one of those bullshit words that always triggered her. During her consulting days, she had overdosed on management jargon and seemingly developed an intolerance. She scratched her forearm. "We will be having another ex-Zebra joining us too," Todd said, then paused to look around the room. "Do you want to know who?" Marie didn't really at this point, but she indulged him by nodding faintly. "Richard," he said, almost shouting and raising his arms. "What?" Marie leaned into the table, almost bumping her chest into her cup. "Yes," Todd said. Then he looked around again. "The press release is coming out later today," he said, "so I am almost not violating anything by telling you." He was smiling from ear to ear. Marie was stunned. Richard joining ConvoSystems was a big scoop. After leaving Zebra Apps, he had mainly been doing interim management as CTO for edtech startups. Marie had never imagined he would take on a job at a corporation the size of ConvoSystems. Natalie would be shocked. Unless she already knew, of course. Then it hit her. Maybe that was what the heated exchange between Mark and Natalie was about the other day. Maybe one of them had gotten the news about Natalie's co-founder joining one of their competitors. "That is major," Marie finally said. "But didn't you have a CTO already?" "Yes, we did," he said solemnly. But he felt that ConvoSystems was no longer a company that he could imagine himself in. Marie raised her eyebrows. "Why not, if I may ask?" she said. "Our culture attracts great people like Richard now," Todd said, "but it is not for everybody." Then Todd looked at her with a sparkle in his eye. "Some of them are leaving for Zebra," he said. "How is Shane doing?" Marie rolled her eyes, thinking back to her onboarding meeting with the new employees joining. "Ugh," she said, "but let's see if he grows on this." "He will grow on you as long as you pay the highest salary in the market." Todd gave her a look and continued. "I heard about the offer you made him." Marie nodded. "We won't be leading on salaries anymore," she said. Todd raised one eyebrow. "We have installed soda fridges now," Marie said, with a straight face. Todd burst out laughing. Marie held a straight face for a couple of seconds, but then laughed until she couldn't breathe. Todd wiped a tear away with his napkin. "Seriously, though," Marie said, still chuckling, "I wanted to talk to you about Jaque." Todd smiled. "I'm not sure he will be as big a problem for our culture program as I had feared," she said. "You're embarking on a culture program?" Todd said. "Yes, the leadership team just approved it last night," Marie said. "Congratulations," Todd said, and reached out to touch Marie's shoulder. "That must have taken some convincing." "Honestly, not. They all agreed to it without any comments," Marie said. Todd said, eyes widening. Marie frowned her eyebrows. "What do you mean?" she said. Todd showed his teeth and held his breath. Finally exhaling, he said, "It means that they either do not know what they are starting or they are not taking your suggestion seriously." Marie's eyes widened. "What?" she said. Todd showed his teeth again. "Jaque would never agree to start a culture program like the one we went through at ConvoSystems," he said. "He did not like the whole idea of empowering the in-field sales team that our culture program led to. He just wanted to tell them what to do." Marie looked at him in disbelief. "You know it is the whole reason he left ConvoSystems, right?" He looked at Marie. "Once people felt safe enough to speak up, no one wanted to work for him anymore." Marie sat back in her chair. It did seem easy. Too easy. Her stomach sank and she felt like a student bringing her dissertation to her professor for review, only for him to take her key arguments apart, and her having to cancel her planned trip surfing and instead spend her weekend rewriting the whole thing. "Is there an angle on Jaque?" she asked, trying to find something to cling to. Todd looked up at the ceiling. "He is motivated by status and power," he said, "but he probably wants these things because that is what is appreciated in his peer group." Marie thought for a minute. "He is a middle-aged white man," she said, "so that is a probable assumption. But if he is separated from his peer group," Todd continued, "you may be able to speak to his humanity." Walking out to her car, Marie thought about Jaque. How could she separate him from his peer group at the leadership offsite? How could she actually get behind his layers of status and ego and find his compassion? Marie's phone pinged. She took it out and read her message. It was from Eric and read, "Have you seen the press release from ConvoSystems?" Marie sighed. This would be a shock for everyone at Zebra Apps. Whether they had known Richard personally or not, he was a legend, and a symbol of what Zebra Apps once was.
It was a warm day for early May. Marie pulled up to the hotel where the leadership team were meeting for their offsite. It was just far enough outside town so that it felt like being in another place. The hotel was surrounded by a forest, and you could walk to the beach and back again during a coffee break. She checked in at the reception desk and followed the hostess to their section of the conference centre. Marie had booked 4 separate rooms for the offsite, making good on Todd's suggestion to separate the leaders from their peer group. Marie had bought her own meeting charts and markers in case the hotel didn't provide them. She set up a poster in each room that she had spent the night before drawing. It said, "Our core beliefs. Children's brains are not for commercial gain. Curiosity, collaboration, courage, commitment." She thought back to Jason and Simon's farewell party several weeks before. The development team hosted the party in the company parking lot and had planned for multiple food trucks to arrive. For some reason, only the taco truck and the coffee wagon came, so everyone celebrated with the obvious combination of coffee and tacos. Jason and Simon joked all night about who of them represented the tacos and who the coffee. Jason seemed happier than he had been for a long time, and there were no passive-aggressive jokes from Simon. Simon had shared that he was joining ConvoSystems as a regular engineer now. They did not have their own data centre, so they did not need his hardware expertise. He had told Marie that it was more important for him who he would get to work with than the work he would be doing, and that there was no one he would rather work with than Anne and Richard. Jason came over to Marie and asked about the culture programme. It did not seem like Natalie had spoken to Jason about the values he had shared. And why would she, Marie thought? They're company values after all. They are meant to be public and shared. Marie heard voices coming down the hallway. "Hey Marie!" Sheila shouted. Marie opened her arms to give her a hug. "Glad you found it," Marie said, and continued to hug Eric and Joe. Joe put down her box of post-its and markers on one of the side tables. "You can pick any room you like," Marie said. "All right," Sheila said, and went into the room on the far right. Joe and Eric also picked a room each. They planned to divide the leadership group into groups of 1 and have a facilitator in each room to ensure coaching when needed. Mark would facilitate for Natalie. Marie had agreed to that, partly because he was her boss, but also because she felt that he was genuinely trying to shield her from Natalie's foul moods. Ever since the night that she had presented the culture programme to Natalie, it is as if she and Mark have tuned in to the same radio frequency. Marie could hear Natalie speaking from a distance. She came into the main conference room speaking on her phone. Natalie put up one finger and walked up to the floor-to-ceiling window and kept speaking. "No, you don't understand," Natalie said. "It is a big deal." And then she listened to the voice on the phone. "We did not have a competition clause, and even if we did, ConvoSystems is not technically a competitor," Natalie responded. Nodding aggressively, Natalie finally shouted, "Just find a loophole, damn it." She hit the red button on her phone and looked out the window. Then she smiled as she turned around, maintaining the same smile as if she was wearing it as an accessory. "What a lovely location, Marie," Natalie said. "Yes, and on a day like this," Marie said. "I might have to take a couple of calls during the session," Natalie said, looking down at her phone. Marie stepped back and took a basket from the side table of the room. "That's why I brought this," Marie said. "Put it in here." Natalie's eyes widened and expanded. "It's 3 hours, Natalie," Marie said, and waved the basket towards her. "You can catch up on calls later." Natalie tightened her lips and narrowed her eyes, but put the phone in the basket. "Is there some coffee in this place?" Natalie said, and walked out of the room, no longer smiling. Marie could hear Natalie greet Frank in the hallway. "Quick, hide your phone," Natalie roared, then broke into laughter. Frank walked into the conference room. "Where do you want this?" he asked, holding his phone in his hand. Right here in the basket, Marie replied. Still not a lot of sentences being exchanged with Frank, she thought to herself, as he sat down at the conference table and took out his notebook. Soon Mark and Jenny arrived too, and sat with their coffee at the conference table. The clock was almost 9, but still no sign of Jaque. I would call him, you know, Natalie said with half a smile, but I literally can't. The others sniggered. Jaque walked in the door as he was biting into a croissant. He sat down slowly. Nice of you to show up, Natalie said. What? I'm on time, Jaque said, croissant crumbs falling from his mouth. Marie walked over to him with the basket. Is it Christmas already? He remarked. No, it's for you to put your phone in, Marie said. No, Jaque said. Surely a man of your stature can live without checking Snapchat for 3 hours, Marie said. The others laughed. Jaque put his phone in the basket. Marie saw something in his eyes that she couldn't quite read. Then the day's agenda could begin. Marie introduced the rediscovered values and how Natalie and Richard had founded the company upon them. Natalie was quiet for most of the introduction, but her face was relaxed. The others were actually paying attention. Marie was about to introduce their individual breakout sessions when Jenny intervened. If these are Zebra's values, why was I not introduced to them when I joined? Jenny asked, looking at Mark. Mark looked down at the table. Natalie looked at Marie. Sometimes focus in a company has its ebbs and flows, Marie said. After Zebra had experienced financial issues, we shifted our focus to making commercial progress. Natalie smiled a barely distinguishable smile. Jenny looked straight at Natalie. Is this HR bullshit, or are you actually behind this? She asked. Natalie laughed a nervous laugh. You all approved the culture program when Marie presented it to us in April, Natalie said. Don't try that on me, Natalie. I'm not the education ministry, Jenny scoffed. Yeah, are these the founding values or not? Jaque chimed in. Natalie stood up and walked to the end of the table. You may remember that I used to be a teacher, Natalie said. Glad you're not teaching my kids, Jaque shouted. Natalie raised an eyebrow. It was not so much teaching that I was tired of, Natalie continued, but how disempowering it felt to be a teacher in our school system. Jaque sat up straight in his chair. When I met Richard, we wanted to create something that felt different. A company that made teaching about the children and dignified for teachers. We wanted to explore what that could look like, whether it was supported by technology or not. We even considered opening a school in the beginning. Natalie stopped and looked down at the floor. We also tried working together with some of the existing edtech providers at the time, but they were not bold enough. They only wanted to support classroom-based teaching as it is, not attempt to reinvent it. Natalie paused. When our initial products didn't pan out, we disagreed on how to handle it, Natalie went on. And Richard decided to take his commitment to Zebra apps and toss it in the bin. Natalie sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. This was not exactly the kind of support Marie was hoping for. No one spoke. Marie broke the silence. There is history here with these values, she said, and today we are going to try them on for size and see if they still line up with the kind of organisation we want to be. She went on to explain that they would be sent to each their room to go through 4 facilitated exercises. 1. Brainstorm the meaning of each of the values. 2. Write down examples of where they currently see the value at play at Zebra. 3. Write down examples where they see people behaving counter to the values. 4. Identify which value mostly resonates with them as individuals and which one resonates the least. She sent them out to their rooms. She saw Jaque going to the room furthest on the left and caught the back of Frank heading to the room furthest on the right, where Sheila was waiting. Marie followed Jaque into the conference room furthest on the left. He sat down in the chair next to the whiteboard where the poster was fixed. "I'm starting to feel Snapchat withdrawal setting in," he joked. Marie smiled. He looked at the poster. "What am I supposed to do again?" Marie gave him a marker. "Let's start with brainstorming the meaning of each value," she said. They created mind maps for each value. Marie was surprised to find Jaque engaged, even thoughtful. For courage, he elaborated on how challenging what the clients wanted with what they might actually need was his secret sauce for selling. "It's like you," he said, turning towards Marie, "when you call me out for being an arsehole, for dragging my feet to our coaching sessions, or refusing to give my phone up." Marie smiled and lifted her eyebrows. She did not want to ruin that compliment with digging further into it, and they continued to the next exercise. "Commitment," he said, and paused. "We don't see a lot of that at Zebra these days," he said. "What do you mean?" Marie asked. "People are quitting left and right, jumping off to competitors or wherever else," he continued. "But why is that a lack of commitment?" she asked. "It's a lack of commitment to Zebra," he said, raising his voice. "But what is Zebra committed to?" she asked. He turned a chair around and sat down facing the board. "To reaching our quarterly sales numbers," he said slowly. Marie nodded. "Was it different before?" he asked. "Before you joined?" Marie asked. "When this Richard guy was still here," Jaque said. "He wasn't here when I joined," Marie said, "but it was different back then." He looked at her. "You know," he started, but paused. "You know, I have lived through another change transformation at ConvoSystems." Marie nodded. "It was all about employee empowerment and delegating responsibility downward to stay innovative," he said, gesturing an upward curve with his hand. "I was new in the sales director role back then," he continued, "and suddenly no one was paying any attention to what I wanted us to do." Marie looked into his eyes. "I'd finally reached that stage where I would get to decide, and we gave that power away to everyone else," he said. He shrugged his shoulders. "Of course, if I'd had the power to decide how I wanted to do my sales when I was a rep, I might never have climbed the ladder in the first place," he said. "Might have taken up golf." He laughed, and Marie smiled. "So which one of these resonates most with you?" Marie asked. "Collaboration," he said. Marie raised her eyebrows. "Are you surprised?" he asked. "A little bit," she admitted. "What I was trying to do at ConvoSystems was to get sales and marketing to work closer together, ideally as one team," he said. "That and working with customers are the best ways to sell." "Have you tried making it work here?" she asked. "Both sales and marketing are in your organization." He looked down. "You know, I haven't," he said. "I guess I burnt my hands last time around I tried." Then he pointed to the poster. "Courage is what I have least of," he said. After the break, Marie was calling everyone back to join in the main room when she saw Sheila. Her eyes were red and she was wiping her nose with a Kleenex. Marie walked over to her. "Are you okay?" Marie asked. Sheila shook her head. Marie ushered her into the closest meeting room. "Are you sick?" Marie asked. Sheila shook her head again. He wouldn't say anything, she said. Who? Marie asked. Frank, Sheila said. The more he was silent, the more I spoke, the angrier he looked. Where is he now? Marie asked. He yelled at me and left the room, Sheila said. What did he yell? Marie asked. Something about that now Natalie has really lost it, Sheila said and looked around the room. Okay, find some water to drink, find Eric, and I will go look for Frank, Marie said. Sheila nodded. Marie went to the coffee room. No Frank. She went to the reception and asked if they had seen an older man in a grey suit. They said that he had walked to the parking lot. Marie walked to the parking lot to look for his car. Realising she didn't know what it looked like, she went back inside. She counted the phones in the basket. There were 5 phones. So if Frank did leave, he did not take his phone with him. Are we starting now? Jenny asked, and Marie was startled out of her thoughts. Yes, let me just get the others, Marie said. In that same moment she saw Frank walking towards the hotel from the direction of the sea. Marie sighed with relief. He came back in, crossed his arms and sat down in silence. Marie called Jaque, Natalie and Mark back. The remaining hour they individually took turns sharing a definition of a value and how it is currently seen in the organisation, or not seen. Marie looked around the room. Based on what you just shared, she said, we do see these values at play in our organisation. Everyone nodded except Frank. Natalie walked up to the front of the room. Are we keeping these values, or what? Natalie said. Jaque, Jenny and Mark clapped. Frank was silent and motionless. As soon as Marie adjourned the meeting, Frank walked over to the basket with phones, grabbed his, and quickly walked out of the door. Natalie fished out her phone. It was ringing. She picked up the phone and answered. Hello, she said. Yes, thank you for looking into it. She walked towards the window again. You know, on second thoughts, I don't want to pursue litigation, she said. She sighed and her shoulders fell. Let him commit to ConvoSystems, she said. Marie smiled and felt good about what they had accomplished in just 3 hours. The email came on Friday morning. Marie was on her way up the stairs to have breakfast with her team as usual, cinnamon buns greasing through the paper bag in her hand. She leaned on the banister and pulled out her phone from her pocket, extending her bun-holding arm for balance. She wanted to check which meeting room they had set for breakfast, but stopped in her tracks with the email from Mark, hands still extended. Subject: Frank O'Hara is retiring. Body: effective immediately, Frank will be stepping back from his role as CFO. Frank was originally hired by the founders to help with the bookkeeping, but over time grew his role to become our CFO. Frank will be enjoying time with his grandchildren and taking up golfing. We thank Frank for many years of loyal service to the company. The search for a new CFO has already begun. Kind regards, Mark, VP of HR. Marie accidentally let go of the bag of cinnamon buns, and it fell. It fell all the way to the basement floor. Shoot, Marie thought to herself, and walked all the way down. The basement floor was full of stacked office furniture and server casings. She could not see her bag anywhere. She looked up. Leaving them was not a good option, but she did not feel like rummaging through all that junk to look for her probably crushed buns. She decided to run to the coffee shop on the corner and get fresh ones. She texted her team, lost the buns, getting new ones from the coffee shop. Right away, Eric responded with a curious face emoji. Marie put her phone in her purse and rushed up the stairs to the exit. There was a line at the coffee shop. She was trying to eye the mantra to see how many cinnamon buns were left when her eye caught a familiar stature. Simon's. "Hey," Marie said. Simon was in line right in front of her. He turned around. "Marie," he exclaimed, and leaned over to hug her. Right in front of Simon, Marie saw Anne. "Hey, Marie," Anne said, and extended her hand for a handshake. Marie shook her hand. "What are you two doing out on a Friday morning?" Marie said. "We're colleagues now," Anne said. "Yeah, we're just catching up," Simon said. "What about you?" Anne asked. "I dropped my bag of buns down the stairwell," Marie said, stretching her lips. "Down into the heap of junk?" Simon laughed. "Yeah, you're never going to see those again," Anne laughed. "How did the leadership offsite go?" Simon asked. Marie looked at him. "You remembered that?" she said. "I may have been high on caffeine at my farewell party, but I was damn sober," Simon joked. "If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said that it was a roaring success," Marie said. "But this morning I got an email that Frank is retiring." "Retiring or retiring?" Simon asked, doing air quotes. "What can I get for you?" the barista asked. Anne went on to order for herself and Simon. "I don't know," Marie said, "but it was very sudden." "What happened during the offsite?" Anne asked, turning around. "He kind of shut down, really," Marie said. "Sheila was crying after facilitating with him." "You put Sheila in the same room as Frank?" Anne asked, raising her eyebrows. Marie ordered 5 cinnamon buns to go and was handed a brown bag. "Come sit with us for a minute," Simon waved her over. Marie clutched the brown bag firmly with her hand. "Sheila is pure creative energy," Anne said. "Frank is all about the details. They're like polar opposites that cancel each other's energy out." "Are you saying he left because I left him in a room for an hour and a half with Sheila?" Marie asked. "No, of course not," Anne said. "Frank was hanging by a thread for a long time," Simon said. "Every time I would come into his office, he was shaking his legs and fidgeting." "You went into his office?" Marie asked. "Yeah, he was actually a fun guy," Simon said. Marie and Anne exchanged glances. "That you have to explain," Anne said. "Decent, hard-working, detail-oriented, but fun?" Simon smiled. "He was guy stuff fun," he said. "He loved Tintin and sailing, and he was a big supporter of any hardware that I needed for the data center." "Don't you miss your data center?" Marie asked. Simon looked down. "I don't miss being angry and feeling like I am overlooked," he said. "The data center is just servers." Marie was quiet for a minute. "This is just the beginning, you know," Anne said. Marie looked at her. "What do you mean?" Marie asked. "When you start rocking the boat like you have, people will get frustrated and angry," Anne said. "You can't stop until you've transformed the whole system." "You and your systems," Marie said. "An organization has an operating system," Anne went on. "Its operating system is its culture and ways of working. You have started scratching a corner of that in an organization with a lot of pent-up anger and anxiety. Humors are about to get hot."
You're listening to Maneuvering Mondays, a podcast about transforming work culture. Tune in when we invite guests to comment on this part of Marie's journey. What are your thoughts on Marie's situation? Have you had a similar experience? And what would you have done? Join the conversation on our LinkedIn page and let's maneuver Mondays together.